Hi, everyone. Welcome to this Writing an Awesome Resume training delivered as a webinar. Typically, we do these trainings live with lots of opportunities for interaction and workshopping your resume. We're going to be doing that again soon. But in the interest of getting this information out, we are recording this session to provide you with everything that you need to get started on writing an awesome resume. So welcome. By way of introduction, I'm Heather Schmucker. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am originally from a small rural town in southwestern Pennsylvania. And before I was an organizer, I was a theater producer. I spent a lot of years as a theater producer and then spent some time working on campaigns before becoming the director of digital organizing and strategy at Open Progress, where I led peer-to-peer texting campaigns across the country. I have since moved and joined the team at Arena. So happy to be here and especially love giving these resume trainings because as someone who made a mid-career shift, right, and who was a theater producer with a lot of transferable skills into this space, I really struggled with my resume. I struggled to figure out how to talk about my skills. I struggled to figure out the lingo of the electoral space, right, and what to focus on and what not to focus on. And I had a lot of terrific people to turn to and help me sort of figure that out. So I am excited that we are together for this training today. Let's jump right in. I want to talk a little bit about our session goals. So our first goal is to understand really what the number one goal of your resume is. From there, we want to understand what the basics of writing a strong resume look like. You will learn some do's and don'ts that are going to really help your resume get seen. And then we want you to understand some pro tips that you can apply to your resume work. And those really depend on where you are in your career and your process. So some may or may not apply to you. And then finally, we want to tell you a little bit more about how Arena Careers, our online platform, our LinkedIn for progressives, can help you find your next fantastic role. So excited to jump in and with all of those goals in mind. So let's talk about why resumes. Like, this is exactly what I feel like when I sit down to work on my resume. It just, it feels overwhelming. It feels all of the feelings all the time. But I think what has helped me not get overwhelmed is to focus on what the number one goal of our resume actually is. And that goal is to get the interview. So the goal isn't to communicate everything you've ever done and every job you've ever had, highlight every single thing you've ever accomplished to get the job. You don't actually get hired because of your resume, you get an interview because of your resume. So our goal is to get you the interview, and you do that by creating a really clear, concise resume that aligns the value you bring to what the organization needs. So let's talk a little bit about how we do that. Before we jump into the nuts and bolts, we want to put ourselves in the position of the person who's going to be making the decision about who gets the interview, right? That's going to be the hiring manager. On larger campaigns or organizations, the hiring manager maybe is going to be someone from an HR operations position, right? But in other instances, the hiring manager might be a person who's the actual person who's managing the position directly, so the person that you're going to be working with. So here are some important things to consider when you think about where that person is at the moment they're reading your interview, right? Let's remember that political hiring moves fast. We're seeing it now. We're less than 70 days from the election. Lots of campaigns are hiring, lots of organizations are hiring to like fully staff up as we head to November, and that hiring is moving really fast, which means that hiring managers are looking at a lot of resumes. We know that readers, hiring managers, are going to skim for relevant points before deciding who gets an interview. No one is going to read your resume word for word for word. They're going to skim, maybe spend 10 to 15 seconds with your resume to pull out the relevant points before making the decision of interview or no interview. So it's really important that we don't give people any excuses in our resume to get confused and to stop reading, right? If there's a section of our resume that just causes someone to pause and take a moment, it's very likely that they could easily set that aside and not move past. So we want to look and make sure that there's nothing in our resume that is doing that. And basically, hiring managers are looking for something really simple, just clear, concise resumes that give an impression of what you're capable of so that you can get the interview, right? So that you can get to the conversation that will really help you move forward in the process. So let's talk about the basics. Before we talk about how to tailor your resume specifically to the job you're looking for, let's go through all those basics about just how to put together an awesome resume in the political space generally. So this one's hard, but the one-page rule is real. This was a hard one for me, I'm going to be honest. But for all the reasons we just laid out, right? When thinking about what that hiring manager's experience is, keeping your resume to a tight one page is essential for political hiring. So our goal today is to give you all the tools to get your resume to one page in the most painless way possible. Second, good formatting is one of those things that makes getting and keeping your resume to a single page possible, but it is also one of the biggest things that you can do to help your resume be more scannable, easily readable. So let's talk through the specifics of what that looks like in terms of formatting. We recommend always keep it simple. Simple is always the best option. Make sure your section headers are really clear, right? So that people can differentiate when you're talking about your professional experience versus your community involvement versus your skills versus your education. Those section headers just need to be really clear. Similarly, you want to make sure that the organization, the role, the location, and the time period are easy to read and differentiate from one another, right? So that all that information just doesn't run together and the eye can't actually see, okay, what roles has this person actually held? At what organizations? Wait, when did they do that, right? You want that information to be really readable. Don't be afraid of white space, right? I think so many of us who have resumes longer than one page when we start, that was me, our solution to that is to take all the information that was on 2 pages and condense it down to a single page and make our margins super small and our text really dense and our font sizes really small and lose all the white space. So that is going to make your resume unreadable. White space is what really helps make your resume scannable. So don't be afraid of it. Don't be afraid of white space. A single page full of dense text is super hard to read. You want to vary your font sizes, but don't go below 10 points. This is really important. So you want to vary your font sizes so that your headers are clear, so that you can differentiate with your organization, your role, all those things we talked about. But it's really important that nothing go below 10 points because when someone's looking at your resume electronically, which is how we're going to be doing it, it's going to be really hard to read anything smaller than 10 points. You can play with margin size to get to a page. We encourage that. But again, don't forget about the white space rule above. You know, I don't think there's a hard and fast, it has to be a 1-inch margin on every side, but you can't go to margins that are so small that, that your white space is going to disappear. So play with those margin sizes, but remember the white space rule. And in general, we recommend that you don't design your resume unless you're applying for a design role. So this includes adding color and images and, really intricate design to your resume, unless that's the role you're applying for, right? If you're you want to show off your design skills, then yes, by all means do that in your resume. But again, going back to keeping it simple, We don't recommend that you do and spend a lot of time on that design as you're putting your resume together. So let's talk about structure. There's a general basic structure that we use for political resumes, and this is it. We want to have a header, obviously, to go, which includes your name, your mobile number, your email address, and where you're located. Those are the sort of 4 important pieces of information to include in your header. You want to include a summary statement. If you're going to include it, it goes at the top. We're going to talk later in the training about why and when you would include a summary statement or not. Next up is your professional experience. So that's your professional paid experience that is relevant to the job you're applying for. And again, even if you're coming from a completely different industry, it's looking at the skills that are relevant, right? And deciding what to feature in that professional experience section. Your additional experience section can be a lot of different things, right? If you're someone who's volunteered a lot and has a lot of community involvement, very involved in progressive organizations and the Democratic Party, this is a great spot to put your additional experience and list that additional experience. Next, the skills and interest section, if you're including that. I love a good skills and interest section. I think it's very helpful. So I include it there. And then finally, an education and training section. So we recommend that you de-emphasize your formal education experience. It's probably one of the last things that people will look at to evaluate whether to give you an interview. But I think it really is important to find space in the resume for trainings that you've done as professional development trainings, right? If you've taken, if you're an Arena grad and you've taken Arena Academy or Arena 201 trainings, if you've done work with Movement School, if you've done any of the Repower trainings, right? This is a great, or any of the other fantastic trainings that are out there, this is a great space to include that and highlight that. Right? So this is just your basic structure for your resume. And we're going to show you 2 examples coming up. And these examples aren't to look at the specific content, but really to just see how your eye plays over it when you take a look at it electronically here. So this is a resume that we think has some work to do, right? This, again, not to dive into the details of the content, but just scanning this resume visually, it's really hard for me to take out the relevant information and focus on the relevant information that's included here. The formatting is in paragraphs. It's just really, it's obviously 2 pages. It's just really challenging to read and absorb quickly what the information is. But when we look at it in this version with our suggested structure, it gets a little bit easier, right? We've got our professional summary at the top. This person has opted to include that. The headers are really helping us differentiate between, you know, what's their experience and some of their additional experience, what their skills are, where they've worked. It's really easy to see what organization they worked for, what position they held. And then most importantly, they're describing their experience using bullet points. And I think that is one of the biggest things that helps a resume be able to scan visually. So let's talk about that. Bullet points are your friend. So when you're talking about the experience at a particular job, always list your responsibilities and accomplishments in easy to skim bullet points, not in paragraphs. So each bullet wants to be brief and wants to include both what you did and the impact that it had, right? So let's look at a couple of examples. This is our dear Selena Meyer, running for maybe governor of Pennsylvania. And so this person was a field organizer for Selena. And what I notice here is that it's really hard for me. There's great information in here, but super hard for me to like pick it out and know what to focus on, mostly because it's written in this paragraph form, right? But when we look at that information in bullet points, then wow, I'm seeing like a totally different version of who this person is, right? Maybe I'm hiring for a field director, and so, oh, this person has experience building networks of supporters across an entire county, right? They've got recruitment and training experience. I'm going to need someone to train volunteers, and this person trained and managed volunteers, right? And was responsible for neighborhood captains and worked with 1,000 volunteers, right? They know how to plan and host virtual watch parties. That's super important right now in the age of COVID, right? And they were clearly, you know, very successful at getting people to attend that event because their 6,000 voters showed up, right? And then overall, they increased voter turnout, right? So they were successful at their job. And I think it is just the bullet points help put those accomplishments and that work forward in a way that you can easily scan it without having to read and absorb an entire paragraph. Another thing to think about with your bullet points is to start each bullet point with really, really strong active verbs. So again, we're going to show a couple of examples of this, right? This is an example of a bullet point that I got in a resume. So the active verb here is worked, right? The person has chosen to say, worked with a team of 5,000 volunteer texters and 78 volunteer leaders to send 4 million GOTV messages, right? So that's the current active verb. When we think about how we might strengthen that, right? And think about making that verb even more active, I would go with something like led and trained 78 volunteer leaders managing 5,000 volunteer texters to send 4 million GOTV messages, right? Those metrics are great to include, and we'll talk more about that later. But to say that you worked with the team, I think as organizers, our ethic is always to make it about the group, right? And make it not about us as organizers, but about the work of the collective. But I think in the instance of a resume, that's where you want to own the work that you did. You didn't just work with a team of volunteers, you led and you trained that team. So those kind of active verbs like led, trained are super, super, super helpful. Here's another one. Responsible for the strategy and writing of all texting scripts. Also chose audiences to send texts to. Right? I see a lot of bullet points when I review resumes that start with responsible for. And the fact that you were responsible for something is the least interesting piece of information about that thing. It's actually what you did that you want to get at. So I might suggest reframing this as developed targeting and messaging strategy for all texting programs, including writing scripted replies. Right? Because clearly you were responsible for the strategy and writing, and you also were responsible for the targeting, right? So you want to own that. You developed that targeting, you developed that messaging strategy, and you wrote those scripted replies, right? But starting with an active verb like developed is so much stronger than saying you were responsible for something. So look for that in your resume. Here's some great examples of active verbs that we've crowdsourced from a lot of the folks in our community: managed, led, trained, mobilized, built, recruited, implemented, planned, engaged, developed, facilitated, increased, right? Like those are the kinds of verbs that you want to be leading your bullet points with in your resume. We also want to talk about quantifying your experience, right? We saw that example for the great field organizer from the Selena Meyer campaign in PA about where there were some great metrics involved, like great metrics included, so that I was able to understand the scale at which the person worked, right? So you want to highlight the metrics that are relevant to what the organization you're applying to is looking for. If you are talking in your resume about managing people, how many people did you manage? If you're talking about mobilizing voters, how many voters did you mobilize, right? If you managed a budget in any industry, how big was that budget, right? If you are responsible for creating and disseminating content in any industry, how many people did your content reach, right? So use metrics for both what you did and the impact that it had, and that will strengthen. So I'm going to show you another example here. So this is great. This is an example of a pretty strong set of bullet points, right? They're using those active verbs. So I can see that they mobilized people. I can see that they trained volunteers. They recruited volunteers to knock doors and make calls, right? They've led events, lots of good things to get attached to in this version. So not bad. But I would say what would level this up is some metrics, right? So this person says mobilized 52 volunteer leaders and 1,875 volunteers in the state's largest congressional district. So that gives me a sense of scale, right? Like they managed 52 volunteer leaders. That's a lot, right? And we're able to mobilize almost 2,000 volunteers, right? Trained volunteers to have authentic persuasion and turnout conversations. That didn't really need a metric. I feel really good about that. So it's you don't need metrics in every single bullet point, but I think where they apply, it's a good idea. Recruited 4,640 volunteer shifts, knocked 74,000 doors, and made 24,000 calls, right? Again, gives me a sense of scale. They talked about how many events they led and how many supporters attended, right? And that they helped the candidate surpass viability in that congressional district by the second highest margin. So that gives me a sense of you know, the scale at which they worked, and you know what those efforts led to in hard metrics, right? So again, you don't need metrics for every single bullet, but there are metrics and bullets where those metrics will be really helpful. If you are currently working for a campaign, this is specific to you. So for those of us who are coming from other industries, just take this note and carry it forward. But if you're an organizer and you're working for a campaign, it would make sure you pull your metrics before you lose access to VAN and the database, right? So this is a great list that you can look at of different metrics that you might want to make sure you have access to before you leave the campaign. If you're a marketing director with a nonprofit, all right, so you're someone coming from a totally different industry, similar, pull your metrics from your organization before you lose access to those records, because I think once you no longer have your organization's email address, you won't have the same kind of access to all the accomplishments that you made. So make sure that you're grabbing things like all your conversion rates and your traffic growth and your customer or client retention, right? Your social reach, mobile visitors, again, the size of your department's budget, the number of staff you managed, if you increased profits or decreased costs. Like those are just things to grab onto when you leave and have in your pocket for any resume that you might want to, and any job that you might want to apply to. So keep your resume chronological always, right? You're going to list your most recent experience first. You may not list every single job that you've had, and we'll talk about that as we talk about tailoring your experience. But any job that you are including in your resume should be listed chronologically. And if there are really big gaps in your work history, you want to opt for including a summary statement, and that would be a chance to frame that. And again, we'll talk about summary statements as we go forward. So tips for keeping it chronological: list that most recent experience first. If there are big gaps in your work history, again, opt for including a summary statement to frame why. And if you have, a lot of us have experience in campaigns and then also in another industry. We can opt to separate those out into campaign experiences versus other relevant experience or other professional experience, right? We don't have to put every job that we've had in the same category, where there may be a reason why we want to differentiate those. But within each section, keep those sections chronological, right? You also want to work to make every single word count in your resume, especially because we're trying to get it to one page. So the fewer words, the better. How to do that? Avoid jargon. This is especially important for those of us coming from other industries, right? When I started, my resume was full of theater jargon, like ways that we talk about what we do that are just so specific to my industry. And I got a lot of feedback early on saying, like, I don't understand what this is. And I had to learn how to lift that jargon up out of my resume and think about what the like core transferable skills of that work was and how to talk about it, right? So avoid jargon, like really go through your resume and find those places where there is jargon that is so specific that you're just, the reader is just gonna get confused. Keep your sentences short. As much as possible, keep the sentences, your bullet point short. Don't use any extra words that you don't need. So go through your resume, really make sure every single word is serving you, and keep it short, brief, and to the point. See what I did there? Those three things mean the same thing. So I don't need all of them. I get to choose one. So just really important to make sure you're making every single word count. This, I can't tell you how important this is. Proofread for typos and comprehension. And you are not going to be your best proofreader, honestly. You want to proofread it and you want to make sure, but having worked on it and having your head in it, rely on someone else. Get somebody else who hasn't been involved in developing your resume to proofread it for typos, to make sure everything makes sense. If you're an arena grad, as many of you are, you can come to us. We're happy to give you one-on-one feedback on your resume and do some of that proofreading. But really make sure that you don't send out a resume that hasn't had at least one or two sets of eyes on it beyond yours. This is really important, basic. Always send your resume as a PDF and make sure your title is clean, right? So you always should send your resume in PDF, not in a Word doc format. And you want to use a really simple title, like Heather Schmucker, Resume 2020, or Heather Schmucker, Resume June 2020, if you want to keep track of when your resume, when that resume was written. So again, do not submit your resume in Pages. Don't submit it in Word, submit it in PDF. That is going to be the best and easiest way for the hiring manager to read it. And again, these are examples of how you should name your resume. I literally got a resume yesterday that was resume parenthetical 7.pdf. So nothing I can do with that once I download that onto my computer. I don't know whose resume it is. I have no idea, right? So keep it really clear. Nancy McNally, resume, August 2020.pdf. That's the way to go. All right, so a couple quick do this. Those were our basics, right? Those are our basics. So now we're going to move on to a couple quick do this, avoid that. Do include brief info about your education and any relevant professional trainings. We talked about this earlier, right? Start with that most recent training or education. Use that same reverse chronological logic. So you're putting things in reverse chronological order. And ideally keep every entry there to no more than 2 lines. So we don't need to know a ton about your educational experience and your professional development, but having it on your resume is important. Don't include your GPA, your dean's list, your dissertation topic, your college honors and awards. The caveat for this is if you are recently graduated from college, right, and have college level leadership activities, those things should definitely go on your resume under additional experience or additional activities. But it's really important to think about keeping your education section as lean as possible. So things like GPA and Dean's List just aren't things that hiring managers are going to focus on. Do include a skills and interest section if you'd like. I said I'm a huge fan of a skills and interest section. I have one on my resume. But please don't believe that a skills section replaces highlighting the skills under your work experience. So you want to make sure that the key skills that the position you're going after is looking for are contained within your bullet points, right? And your skills section is supplemental, sort of a summary of those skills, so that someone can go to one place and see, oh, I'm definitely looking for someone with volunteer training experience and also experience in this particular computer program, and they can go there and see it. But it's really, really important that you don't believe that just having a skills section replaces really focusing on your bullet points. Do include some of your personality. Think small things that show a little bit of who you are beyond your expertise. So as an example, if you're using a summary statement, you can use unique details about who you are in that summary statement. If you're using a skills section, you can add things you enjoy doing outside of work in your skills section, like a skills and interest section. So I have that I like to cook, and I like to hike, and I like to any of those things that make you sort of a real person outside of the work environment are interesting. Don't include too much personality. So going overboard just with this has the totally opposite effect. So trust your gut. If you're asking, is this thing I've added to my resume too cute by half? Yes, it is too cute by half and should not be on your resume. So just trust your gut. You are your best arbiter of that, but just be careful not to include too much personality. You will get to give them your personality in the context of the interview. On to pro tips. Okay, so as you frame your experience, the job description is going to be your North Star always, right? So one of the ways that you can do this is, one pro tip is writing a compelling summary statement. So we've talked about this a little bit throughout the training. Don't confuse this with an objective statement. I think that's what most of us are used to, an objective statement that tells the organization what you want. A summary statement shows them your value and what makes you unique, right? Not everyone needs a summary statement. We've talked about that. So let's run through when to use one and when not. So why and when summary? We know that hiring processes are fast moving, and that including a summary statement helps you set the terms for how someone can look at your resume. And that can be really powerful. Consider a summary if you're newer to the field that you're applying in. So if you don't have a lot of electoral work or haven't worked in a progressive organization, think about including a summary statement, right? If you're changing fields entirely, like I did, going from theater to organizing, right? Include a summary statement. If you're changing lanes within your field, so let's say you've been a field organizer and you've got cycle and cycle of experience as a field organizer, without any other information, I'm going to look at that resume and I'm going to put it in the field organizer pile because you're an accomplished field organizer. So adding a summary statement that explains why you want to take all of this experience you've gotten as a field organizer and translate it to a communications role, right, can help set the precedent for how the hiring manager is going to look at that field organizer experience and not keep you in that box. The other thing is, if you have a gap in your work history, a summary statement can be a really good thing to sort of get ahead of that and address it. So that is another instance of when to include a summary statement. Generally, we recommend that folks who have a lot of experience in the political space, who have cycle after cycle of experience in the field they're applying to, don't necessarily need a summary statement, right? Because the work speaks sort of for itself. So you can make that call. Keys to a good summary statement, if you're going to include it, include 2 to 3 brief sentences, write it in the third person, Make sure you're highlighting your strongest skills that are tailored to the job you're applying for. So you might need a different summary statement for different jobs that you're applying for. Make sure you're focusing those strongest skills on the value you bring to this job, right? And then include details that are unique to you. You know, maybe you're going to write a cover letter that's going to tell a little bit more of your story. Maybe that cover letter is going to get passed on to the next person to look at, maybe not, right? Or maybe they aren't going to ask you for a cover letter at all. So having some, you know, a summary statement that gives people some unique details about you and tells a little bit of your story can be really helpful. So let's look at some examples. This is a statement from a graduate of our Arena Academy whose previous experience had previous experience as a data analyst and project managing for Habitat for Humanity. So in this case, what I love about this statement, right, is they talk about all of the value that they bring, right? Experienced analyst and operations professional. They've got strong finance and data skills. And then I love this statement. They thrive when building things from the ground up, whether that's a financial model, an organizational process, or a house, right? So it helps connect this experience and this really unique experience they have project managing for Habitat to Humanity to this next step that they want to take, right? Here's another one. This was written by one of our Academy grads who was making the leap from campaign organizer to campaign manager. So again, changing lanes within. So experienced project manager and campaign organizer with strong relationship building skills, thrives when working on a team and promotes positive and productive work environments, remains calm and focused in challenging roles. So I think what's so strong about that is those are all skills, right, that organizers need to have, and that through this resume we're able to show that this person has those skills. And those are also skills that translate in such profound ways to campaign management work. So this person was able to take those skills and really make that, help build that bridge from moving from organizing into campaign management. One other pro tip, include location and relocation information up top. This is really important. Where you're located and if you're willing to relocate, especially now, is helpful information to have, and include that somewhere near the top of your resume. You also want to tailor your experience to the particular job that you're applying for. This is so important, and it doesn't have to be a massive overhaul of your resume, right? It can be simple. So how to do that? Again, the job description is your North Star. So read that job description closely, read for the skills and the strengths and the experiences they're looking for. Highlight the keywords that stand out to you, right? Then go through your sort of long form resume and choose which of your past roles to include based on what really shows off those skills that are required for the job. So choose the roles you highlight based on really what is tailored to the job itself. You want to adjust what you emphasize about a particular experience based on the role. So for example, if you're going for a manager level role, you're going to want to bring forward any past management experience. But if you're going for a role that has digital focus, especially now in the age of COVID, you want to emphasize your digital experience first, right? So you may want to readjust some of your bullet points based on the particular experience that role is calling for. If you've got multiple roles on your resume at the same level, so let's say, again, we'll use organizers as an example. So you've been multiple cycles as a field organizer. As you build out your bullet points and tailor it to the job you're applying for, which in this case, let's say is a regional organizing director role, right? You're looking to make the leap into management. You really want to work to show how each of the experiences you had as a field organizer built on the other. So what differentiated one role from another? What kind of growth can we see in that that you had over time, having those maybe 4 different field organizer roles. Like, is it scale? Is it the level of leadership you were able to take? Is it unique initiatives that you brought and built into each subsequent role, right? So we want to see how you grew over that time and how you grew in a way that makes the case for you to take on a management role, right? Make sure you're also tailoring for the industry you're applying for, not just for the role. So if you're looking for something in the nonprofit sector, they might not use the same jargon as campaigns. So you should tailor your resume to nonprofits. You don't have to make radical changes for each job, but you can just tailor by industry or job type. And again, that's looking for jargon, right? And figuring out how to translate it. So let's return to that example from earlier, because I love examples, where we quantified our experience specific to an organizing job. So let's take that same example and assume that you're applying for a job in the nonprofit field outside of politics, so not a political job. Our experience bullet points hit at some metrics that are really specific to organizing and to turf. And that may not translate as well when you're applying for a, a nonprofit job where campaign and turf is just not part of their thinking and their job. But if we look at this, we can translate that work. We recruited more than 1,000 volunteers to serve as leaders in their communities and engage voters across the district, right? That's really transferable. We managed relationships with team members in person, at field offices, by phone and text and online, right? So that shows that you have management experience and that you've managed in a lot of different mediums, which especially in this moment of COVID, where we're not connected and we're not in person, is so important. Planned an event for up to 300 people to activate them around shared goals, right? So it's not the specifics of the event that you planned for a campaign audience, it's the fact that you planned this event. Collaborated with political communications and data teams to execute a successful campaign, right? So you're talking about you were working across departments, right? So you're able to put that experience into sort of a more 10,000 foot general transferable skills as you translate your skills into a new industry. Finally, we are at the end of all of the tips that I have to give you. I hope this has been incredibly helpful, but we do want to, as we wrap, look here at Arena Careers. For those of you not familiar, Arena Careers is an awesome site that we built. It really is the LinkedIn for the progressive community. There are over, I think at this point, like 3,700 members. It's a way for employers and job seekers to connect. And we want you to join Arena Careers and explore. Right now, there's currently 350 plus jobs listed there. So if you're searching, now is a good time to visit the page daily. There are also 3 working groups that might be of interest to you. We have our Arena Alumni Network, which is open to anyone who is an Arena alum. We have our COVID-19 strategies group and our priority states 2020 working group. So we've got some groups there, but more than anything, it's really an opportunity for you to build your network, find progressive jobs, and really connect with others doing the work. So you can import your resume directly. You can import your resume from LinkedIn. Employers are in every day searching for people and reaching out in the system to connect. So it's a really terrific opportunity. We can't wait to introduce you to it if you are not connected already. The best way to get involved is https://app.arena.run, and that will get you going to become part of our Arena Careers community. So as we wrap this up, I just want to say thank you for sticking with us here. I look forward to seeing you in a live training soon. We're going to be doing a lot of resume workshopping as we head into the post-November cycle. So look forward to that, but want to leave you with a couple of key takeaways just to emphasize what we wanted to learn today. So keep your resume to one page by focusing on what's relevant to the job you're applying for. You want to show your value by highlighting skills and experience relative to the position that are relevant to the position in your work experience, and if applicable, highlighting those skills in a strong summary statement if that's right for you to include. Most importantly, make sure your resume is easily skimmable using clear formatting and bullet points under each of your job experiences. And just finally, remember your resume gets you the interview. That's it. That's it. It's all it has to do. So I hope you can take a breath, take some of the pressure off, absorb these skills. We are very shortly about to come out with a resume guide that kind of encapsulates all of this into a couple of pages. So that will be coming soon. But until then, thank you for being part of this training and webinar, and we look forward to seeing you in the Arena community soon. Have a wonderful day, and good luck with the resumes. Any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. My email is heather@arena.run, heather@arena.run. So drop me a line. Okay, thank you all. Have a wonderful day.